When we hear about the Sabbath, our minds first would turn to the story of the creation, but there's another part of Scripture which would be very close to it in prominence when it comes to discussing the Sabbath, and that's the Ten Commandments. As we read through the story of Exodus, the Sabbath comes up again at a series of points, of significant points. First of all, in the story of the manna, as God prepares for his people food in the wilderness, they need bread, and God gives them this manna. And the manna is provided for 6 days, and on the 6th day it's provided for an extra day. And if they are faithful, they will gather double for that day and the day that follows. But those who do not have faith expect to find some the next day, and there is none. That is provided as the basis for the celebration of the Sabbath. There's one day in 7 where you should refrain from your labours. Now, in the context of Exodus, it's a very important event that provides Israel with a sense of God's way of dealing, a sense of God's provision for them, that God is a God who is not going to leave them to be dependent purely upon their own resources, but God is a good God, a God who gives us what we need day by day and will provide for us when we do not seem to have the resources sufficient for it. So on that 7th day, God's provision will extend to that too, even though human planning, which focuses upon what we might have sufficient for each day, we don't have sufficient for the 2nd day, except by God's extra provision. Now that is provided as a paradigm for Israel's life as a whole. What God has provided for them in the manna is recalled in the sacrifices later on in places like Leviticus chapter 23, that as they offer the omer of the first fruits, that it is a remembrance of the omer that God provided in each day of the manna. There is a manna pattern, God providing for his people day by day, that continues into the life of Israel. And that is the basis for Israel's first celebration of the Sabbath. And then we get in a couple of chapters later to the story of Sinai. And there at Sinai, Israel is given the Ten Commandments, 4th of which concerns the Sabbath. And as we read on in the story of Exodus, we see that the Sabbath is not just one of a miscellaneous group of commandments. The Sabbath is, above all the other commandments, a sign of the covenant. It's a sign of God's relationship with his people, that he has released his people from slavery, and now they should live as a people who are liberated from the burden of toil, and to be people in turn who liberate their servants from the burden of toil. And Sabbath is that great principle at the heart of the week, or at the very end of the week, that culminates everything. It's something that presents that vision of rest for the laborer as a vision that arises out of God's own gift of rest to his people in the Exodus. So God has established the Sabbath at the very beginning, at the end of his work. But God also wants to bring human beings into that rest. He wants to deliver them from the slavery to labor and toil that we can so often experience. I was reading an article a few days ago that was talking about the struggle that we have connecting with our friends in modern society, where so often our lives are dominated by disjoined work patterns, and we have no sense of time to celebrate together. And God sets his people free, and part of that is giving them the gift of the Sabbath, not as a burden upon them, but as a liberating gift that they could celebrate together, that they could know release from their labors, a cessation to their activities.